Hello everybody and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast in association with eBay Motors. It is Saturday the 3rd of April and you're joined by myself, Philip Nothard.
And me, Curtis Hutchinson. This is episode 16, season 7 of Motor Trade Radio, bringing you all the chatter that matters. Once again, we've gathered together this week's big industry stories across the franchised and independent sectors for you to enjoy all in one place on your podcast feed.
So, a lot of things happening now, isn't there? I mean, we're in the middle of an Easter weekend, of which we did start off with some nice weather at the start of the week, but I suppose everyone's wondering what they're going to do with the hot dogs and burgers that they've ordered in for the barbecue. People can meet now in the back garden as well, can't they, Curtis? I think you've got some plans.
Yeah, people can meet. You're right, it's dropped about 10 degrees, isn't it?
just a bit.
That was astonishing, that weather.
And we've got snow forecast for next week.
Nice one.
But showrooms open in Scotland from the 5th, so it's all starting to happen now.
It is, yeah. So the showrooms in Scotland from Monday, and that's followed by England and Wales on the 12th, and had confirmation from the NFDA today that Northern Ireland is open for click and collect only on the 12th of April. So we're kind of getting back into the swing of things, aren't we?
Yeah, it's a bit, there's still sort of things behind the scenes, isn't there? Not necessarily just the automotive sector, but there's things happen that you can do now in Scotland, and Wales opened where there was a bit of excitement, I think, all last week and the week before. People in Wales could go and get the haircut as long as you stayed within Wales. So there's all sorts of these little things happening, nuances that are relative to local areas that are trying to keep an eye on. But unfortunately, France and Germany have gone into further restrictions as well this week.
Yeah, and that is a worry because we have paralleled what's happened in France, Germany, and indeed Italy. So let's just hope we're okay.
Yeah. Fingers crossed. We get this sort of steady opening. It's certainly not a 5th or the 12th of April, and everything's back to normal. But at least there is some kind of return to some kind of normality. So let's hope it just continues that way. But we have got. So you go on.
No, I was going to say, last week on the podcast, we had a bit of a scoop, an exclusive from Darren Martin, who was talking about the March editorial from CAP HPI. So it's still worth heading over to last week's podcast if that's in your podcast feed, because he was talking about values, how values had risen for the first time since October, the continued fall in EV and hybrid values, the impact of the plug-in grant on the used market, and also some dealers operating in March at 90%. So a lot of ground covered there.
Yeah, and everybody's eagerly awaiting now the March new car figures, aren't they? I mean, the March has turned. There's a little bit of data, and we're going to cover some of the data from March performance in this week's headlines. But I think everybody's eagerly waiting to know what the market did for new car registrations. I know that at certain points in the month we were significantly behind where we were last year, and significantly more than that behind what we did in a normal March. But there's a lot riding on it now, and getting back to some kind of normality. And as always, there's winners and losers, as there is a top 10 as well, Curtis.
Yes, yeah, and we will have those figures next week, won't we? New car figures.
Yeah.
But you're right, we will kick off with a top 10. So the first headline this week is from Car Dealer, and the headline is "The top 10 fastest selling used cars in March revealed as dealers turn their stock at quickest pace this year." So we'll look at the top 10 in a moment, but this is research from eBay Motors Group, and it's really their deep dive into the used car trends over the course of March. So average number of days in stock over the course of March was 45.6 days, and that was down from 49.5 days in February. So, it's good to see an improvement there. Franchise dealers turned their stock the fastest at 44.6 days, followed by independents, 48.1 days, and car supermarkets at 50.1 days. But also looking at the average price of cars advertised on the Motors platform, that dipped slightly after rising in February. So that was down 0.8% in March, from £12,784 to £12,684.
Yeah, and it's interesting figures. I don't know what your thoughts are in terms of the franchise, independent, and supermarkets. That the franchise dealer leading the way in terms of turning their stock the quickest in terms of that 44.6 days, as you mentioned. But actually, whether it's supermarkets that seem to be losing out in this market at the minute, and I think Darren Martin mentioned a little bit of that, didn't he, on his interview?
He did,
around
yeah.
that people go to a supermarket to look around, look at choice and things like this, which, if you're going to go and buy a specific brand, you're going onto a franchise dealer's website and you're looking for a specific car of that brand. And he mentioned that maybe that's where the supermarkets are losing out at the minute in this online-only environment.
Yeah, and it's interesting to note that the figures from eBay Motors Group show that car supermarkets in March actually saw prices rise by 1.2%. So that was the only sector that saw any increase.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting, isn't it, as to what the impact is, and whether that is down to stock availability for the supermarkets, that they're not getting the natural part exchanges they may have got in against some of their sales, and it's therefore increasing the average price of their product, or whether it is a default of buying different cars. But it's going to be interesting. But the story does go further, and it kind of talks about the subjects of the moment around alternative fuel vehicles and that of both hybrids and EVs, and they've done some further analysis around diesel and petrol vehicles, and diesel's selling the fastest at the moment with an average of 42.3 days in stock compared to its equivalent petrol at 47.1. But some interesting analysis on EV and hybrid, Curtis.
Yeah, in terms of EVs in March, they accounted for just 1.1% of dealer stock and 0.7% of views, and they took an average of 56.6 days to sell. But it was really hybrids that were hit hardest. They made up 2.3% of stock, but they only counted for 1.6% of online views, and average days to sell were 67.7 days. So they are taking the longest, and we will look at hybrids in a moment. But we've. Shall we just go through the top 10? Top 10
let's do that. Yeah.
Fastest sellers. So number 10, Land Rover Discovery Sport at 34.4 days. Number 9, Hyundai Kona, 34.3 days. Number 8, Mini One at 33.2 days. Number 7, Mercedes-Benz GLE, 32.8 days. Number 6, Audi Q7, 32.5 days. We're now into the top 5. It sounded like a horse race, this, isn't it? At number 5, BMW X4, 31.9 days. Number 4, Citroën Berlingo at 30 days. And top 3, number 3, Mercedes-Benz GLC, 29.9 days. Number 2, Hyundai i40, 29.1 days. And at number 1, the Volkswagen Touareg at 29 days. So some good news there for Volkswagen. We will return to them later, though.
Yes, we will. The story of the week, as you said. So, again, some interesting analysis. And I think the one thing that jumps out there to the listeners and myself is that percentage of EVs and hybrids, that 1.1% and the around 2% for hybrids of making up that stock, still significant low, which sort of leads on to some of the conversations we've had recently with Mike Hawes being one of them, that there's a lot of work to do on EV, particularly in the used car sector, isn't there?
Yes, and next headline following on from that is from AM Online, and it's hybrid becomes most popular powertrain for future buyers. So this is looking at the purchasing intentions amongst customers, and those small percentages that we saw in the first story maybe they will change over the coming months as buyers get back into the market and start looking at their next purchase, because the research here is from Close Brothers, and they found a quarter of UK drivers plan to buy a hybrid powered car next.
Yeah, and it's they talk about the impact of the government's ban on sale of the new and used cars, and obviously the reduction in support around the EV. But there's a lot going on in that market at the minute. We're talking about that. When it comes to electric cars, they said that 13% said they will choose a plug-in model and 12% for a pure EV. So still a lot to do, I think, there.
Yeah, but only 1 in 5, so 22% of drivers intend to purchase a petrol vehicle, and that's down from 37% last year. So it is showing the intent amongst buyers. This is now on their radar.
Yeah, definitely, and I think it is. Well, it's on everybody's radar at the minute in terms of this drive towards the 2030 target. What that's going to look like in terms of the new car model mix and proposition, both in the fleet and the consumer market. But and more important, like I said earlier, what that means for the used car market as well, as these vehicles sort of come out anew into the used car market, which currently has no really initiative at all from anybody, either the OEMs or the government, to support the EV growth in the used car market. So still a long way to go, but I think a little bit of green shoots there, that there is a bit of optimism that there is this drive towards EV and alternative fuel.
Yes, next headline is from Motor Trader, and it's pandemic has profound impact on dealers sourcing used cars. So this particular story is based on some research that you guys did at Next Gear Capital.
Yeah. So I think this was looking at obviously what in terms of the pandemic, and we know there were certain trends that were already happening pre-pandemic, and I suppose the question is how much has it accelerated some of these trends, and one of them was trying to look at in terms of that stock profiling. So as we come out of the pandemic, and we talk about the constraints on vehicle supply, we've just been talking about obviously the percentage share of EVs and alternative fuels hybrids on the stock profiles from the eBay Motors data. But actually, what are the dealers going to do in terms of that stock, and where are they going to buy the product from as well? More importantly, are they going to get it through physical digital auctions? Are they going to get it through part exchanges, etc.? And one interesting point, and you mentioned it before the show, that that move towards that growth in part exchanges, and what that means and why they've said that.
Yeah, because this is very much dealers holding on to part exchanges, which in previous years they probably would have traded out.
Yeah. I think there is I think we saw it going into the pandemic, the demand for that lower price vehicle. We've seen, Darren Martin was talking about that strength in that premium brand throughout the pandemic. But, I think that as stock becomes more of a challenge to get a hold of, then there is a potential that some of the dealer sector will be looking at changing their profile, either increasing age and mileage points, or reducing age and mileage points and going a little bit into that 0 to 12 month market, but actually maybe start retailing cars that they wouldn't have normally retailed is potentially an outcome from this.
Yeah, and also I noticed that almost two-thirds expect to be sourcing more vehicles direct from consumers, which that really should be an easier option than it is now. And I'm kind of talking from experience, because I sold a car recently to my local dealer because I didn't need to replace it. I just wanted to get rid of it, and that the process should have been an awful lot easier. And some dealers actually advertise the fact that they're happy to buy cars from customers, but most customers are totally oblivious to that. And there is an untapped source of used cars out there.
Yeah, I think it's a profound result of this, that there is going to be different ways of sourcing vehicles through like you say, direct purchase, through online auctions, etc. So again, the dynamics are going to change as we come out of the pandemic, is what obviously Liam is trying to highlight there within the report.
You're listening to All the Chatter That Matters on Motor Trade Radio, brought to you in association with eBay Motors Group. This is your weekly one-stop shop for all the biggest car retailing headlines, and available by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you find your favourite podcasts. Also, if you'd like to come on the show or have any news stories for us, then drop us an email at motortraderadio@yahoo.com.
And I think, is this a first for Sky News? I think it probably is this week.
Yeah, soon to be followed by their second story as well. So it's a busy week this week for Sky News.
Yeah,
yes.
they have. And they thought of this is an interesting story because I think we missed the first announcement of this on last week's show. But obviously subsequently followed by the second announcement that came out. And this is talking about the online used car unicorns, Cinch and Cazoo, in a 10 billion race to reshape the industry. And this is talking around, obviously, Cazoo going on the stock exchange through a US SPAC, SPAC. And I think they've floated on the New York Stock Exchange, and Cinch are also doing further investment growth as well. So again, a big race there between those two.
A big race and big figures as well. And this story broke. It started to break on Saturday, and I urge you to go over to the Sky News story because it's very good. It's quite thorough, and it combines the latest on both Cinch and Cazoo. So I guess what was surprising and what was attracted a lot of comment on social media is the values that are being attributed to these companies.
Yeah, and I think some of this is the fact that they're being viewed as tech businesses. In terms of non-comparison to physical dealers, but as you say, there's a lot of conversation and debate taking place in terms of social media for both stories, isn't there, at the minute? I think there's many of the UK dealers have certainly got an opinion on what's happening, whether it's viable, and more importantly, whether it's worth it.
Yes, yeah. And heading over to AM Online, and the headline there is Automotive Mental Health Movement Gets Marshall's Backing as Gupta Becomes Patron. So this is a story about Menable, which is headed up by Stephen Whitten, and Dash Gupta has become, obviously chief exec of Marshalls. He's become the patron of this new body, which really concentrates and focuses in on mental health for men in the automotive sector.
Yeah, and I mean, we know Dash loves this kind of thing. I think just from my own personal relationship with Dash, he's supported well-being generally. He's a big supporter. He's heavily involved with Ben, the charity, for the automotive sector. And I think the work that Stephen Whitten's doing is fantastic. And I think Stephen's more about the culture of well-being, rather than the result of it. He's trying to change leaders' culture and senior executives' culture around the world of well-being within this industry and other industries. In fairness, but obviously he's got a comfort of the automotive sector. He's got some fantastic relationships as Stephen across the automotive sector, and obviously with that relationship with Dash there, and Dash taking it on and leading as you say, as a patron there. And I think we're going to see a lot more from Menable and Stephen Whitten on this. But it's fantastic for the sector and fantastic in general for what we've been through for the last 12 months and the support that's needed.
Yeah, definitely. And we're hoping to catch up with Steve Whitten, possibly next week. So do look out for that in your podcast feed, because it'll be interesting to hear his thoughts behind how the organisation was formed, what it plans to do, what its current plans are, and also the incredible support it's got from the sector.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the big story of the week, we've got a fantastic and finally here. And if you haven't seen any of this in the social space, then where have you been? In fairness, because this has seriously hit the headlines in the last few days, ahead of the 1st of April, may I add, as well. And you picked up the story in Sky News, and it says VW sorry for early April Fool's Day Volkswagen PR stunt, which is VOLTS. So again, quite a lot on this one, particularly on the day and subsequently after that, and more on the April Fool's Day itself. It's not gone down very well.
Yeah, the art of telling a good joke is timing, and Volkswagen got this one totally wrong. You said it hit the headlines. Well, it also hit the fan, and VW are going to this is going to haunt them. So the background to this particular story is that early in the week, Volkswagen in the US partly published a press release as, I guess, a teaser, and this was announcing that it was rebranding as Volkswagen of America. So US journalists saw the release, they got in touch with Volkswagen to say, is this for real? Is this really happening? And Volkswagen confirmed it, and shortly afterwards published the full press release. So those journalists went off, wrote their stories in good faith, only to find out that they'd been hoodwinked. It was an April Fool's Day, but it wasn't released on April Fool's. It was released on, I think, Monday and Tuesday during the week. So Volkswagen have ended up with a lot of egg on their face, because these journalists, when they discovered they'd been hoodwinked, went on social media and really laid into Volkswagen about how they'd been misled. Now, ordinarily, this wouldn't really matter very much, but we're talking about Volkswagen and the brand heavily associated with Dieselgate back in 2015. And I say heavily associated because Volkswagen actually did a brilliant job at moving on from Dieselgate, but those wounds have reopened as a result of this, because the journalists and people on social media are saying, well, can we trust anything they say?
Yeah, there was a view that it was a kind of a publicity to increase share prices, which I think it did at the time. I think the share prices did rise as a consequence of it, and it got a lot of people thinking, is it actually an April Fool's, or is it not an April Fool's? It's not April Fool's yet, but it sounds credible because it was written in a credible format, wasn't it? I mean, as you said earlier, it was taken in good faith from the journalists. So, it did actually have an impact on share value. But as you say, a little bit of egg on the face there, because now, the Dieselgate is appearing in a lot of the media now. So it's sort of resurrected that word that I think the sector and VW would rather forget, as one of the longest serving hashtags of the sector for some years, hasn't it? So it's a shame. It is a real shame. And actually, I think we were again talking before, it made a little bit of sense to a certain degree in terms of combining with the launch of the electric SUV over in the US, VW's broader VAG's brand sort of moving towards that EV, the electric vehicle sector, at some significant pace, and it kind of, it's an interesting one. Like I say, it's created conversation.
And it was, as you say, built around the launch of this new EV SUV in May. And you can imagine that a lot of the marketing would have been based around Volkswagen, which, if you're marketing a new car, that's actually really clever. And, it would get people talking about Volkswagen for the right reasons, but they've totally shot themselves in the foot now, because they can't use that name anymore. They'd be absolutely crazy to use that. But interestingly, in this Sky News piece, they do speculate that Volkswagen bigwigs in America went down this route because they're fed up with all the good press that Tesla is getting at the moment for leading the way in EV, and they wanted a bit of the action, but it hasn't happened.
No, it's not. It's not going to do very well, has it? But it's quite. Yeah, I saw some statistics this week in terms of the growth and pace of the Tesla brand, in terms of volume of vehicles compared to VW, and the entrance into the electric vehicle sector by VW and the speed of the volume. And they're not far behind in terms of that pace of growth against the Tesla, but. Yeah, it probably wasn't very good. This was it. I think it's. But then again, with Curtis, we're talking about it. So you know what?
Yes,
It's certainly hit the headlines. It's it's hitting everybody's headline and social feed at the minute, and we're talking about it even on the Motor Trade Radio podcast, Curtis. So well done, marketing team, for that one.
Yeah, we've become part of the marketing machine, haven't we?
We have. But there's quite a few headlines there. Again, jump over to the interview with Devon Martin. Still relevant, still valid, still some insight there in terms of what to expect as the market starts to open. Good luck to the guys up in Scotland if you listen to this for Monday in terms of that, the reopening of your showroom. And obviously, best of luck with everybody else as you've closed down the month of March, and we head into the second quarter, and hopefully we'll put the first quarter to the back now and move on. And but yeah, lots of headlines, so there was too many to choose from again this week, Curtis, I think.
Yeah, but unfortunately, that's all we've got time for this week. Thanks for joining us for all the chatter that matters. You've been listening to the weekly Motor Trade Radio podcast brought to you in association with eBay Motors Group. Do enjoy your Easter weekend, and as Phil says, good luck to all the Scottish dealers reopening on Monday. Do let us know how you're getting on. Until then, stay safe and well. Philip and I are back again next weekend with the week's headlines. Until then, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.